Welcome to the spoiler review of All the Old Knives. If you're looking for the one with no spoilers, then I will link that down below and up in the top right hand corner. If you're here for the spoilers, let's get into it. So in case you didn't watch my original review, the plot for this movie is basically a plane gets taken over by terrorists and crap goes wrong. So our main character in the future has to go back and try to find out if there was a mole and if that is what caused everything to go haywire. And in order for him to figure out if there's actually a mole or not, he has to go back and question his former colleagues and also his former lover. And that gets us to what I want to talk about today. So I'm going to get into two big plot twists of this movie right now. First of all, the main mole the entire time is Chris Pine's character, Henry. Second of all, his lover, or former lover, was aware of it the whole time, but we didn't know that. Like, throughout the whole movie, I was trying to figure out who was good and who was bad. And due to every single piece of visual and auditory evidence that is given throughout the movie, every story beat, every single scene has something that makes me think, well, maybe it's them, or I don't want it to be them. That's the whole movie. Okay, like, my first thought was maybe Celia and Bill were in on it together. And there were a lot of clues that would make you think that, like Bill calling Celia and warning him, hey, I just got interrogated by Henry, or whenever Celia's first talking about what happened, she's like, oh, this guy came up to me named Carl with a K, and he's like, Bill could be selling our secrets, that kind of stuff. So they were obviously the first people I was like, okay, maybe they're in cahoots together, maybe this is how they're doing it. So that was my first assumption on how this movie could be going, in the direction it could be heading when it comes to the mystery. Then I start really liking Celia herself, and I start thinking maybe she's just in a precarious situation. She is getting questioned, practically interrogated by her ex-lover. So maybe she's just uncomfortable right now. She's just trying to figure out where his headspace is at, and she might still have feelings for him. So I start thinking maybe it's just Bill, because it would make sense as Bill due to other things that are planted, like a call log that Celia finds has Bill calling a number that belongs to a suspected terrorist. And Bill leaves for his wife. He leaves because she's having some kind of fit or something. I don't quite remember. So he leaves to go take care of that, which just makes him seem more suspicious. But then I start thinking, well, maybe Celia is in on it alone, because after Bill leaves, she has full access to his office. She finds the call log of where he apparently called. She doesn't tell anybody. She could have planted that there the entire time just to make him seem guilty, because nobody knows that she saw this call log except for her. So I'll start thinking, well, maybe she's planting seeds so she can get away with it. Something else that made me think that was whenever she goes out to see her quote-unquote sources, and one of them is a source that Henry has. It's a little suspicious there because we don't quite know what's going on at first, what they could have been talking about, where she could have actually went, if that's actually who she talked to, how all that went down. It's all a little fuzzy. Even as we start to figure out what actually happened, we still don't know the full extent of it. So it did make me a little bit suspicious of her. But then as the pieces begin to unravel, and as Celia responds to some questions and talks about some things, Henry's facial expressions start to change. He starts excusing himself away from the table, and it seems to be because he's emotional over the fact that he is talking to his former lover that left him. But then you start getting a little bit suspicious, because why was he cleared so quickly? He had access to all of these people at this time. He was close to them, he was in areas with them, so maybe it had to do with him. But I originally thought that if that was the case, it would be because he is angry that his source got given up, because his source is the actual main antagonist, in my opinion, the one that causes all these problems, because he's mad at Henry because Henry was his handler, and they got outed. His source got outed. His name got out. He got extradited to Russia, to Moscow, and his daughter ended up dying because whenever they retreated Moscow to get to Iran, they didn't have the medicine, they didn't have the supplies to save her. So the source ended up losing his daughter because he was outed by the guy who he trusted, who he loved as family, as a friend. So I thought maybe Henry might have met with him, might have found him, might have been like, hey, this wasn't me, this was the government, this wasn't my choice, and wanted to get revenge, wanted to try to make things right. Then my second thought of what could be going on if Henry is actually the one that outed them is because maybe he wanted Celia to be able to solve the case. Maybe he was doing it in order for Celia to be able to swoop in and save the day because she was meeting with the contact that he had. So I thought maybe he told that contact to meet with her so they could come up with a plan or come up with a way for her to become the one that saves everything, to become the hero, to get a promotion, to do as good as he believes that she could in a position where he believes she'd be most effective. In the end, though, it wasn't any of that. It was actually a lot more clever than I thought that it was going to be, because whenever Celia goes to meet her sources, quote unquote, she's actually walking into a trap, but not necessarily a trap for her, but a trap for Henry, because at that same time he meets up with his old source that got burned, and the guy says, hey, call your lover, and he repeats it until Henry finally conforms, finally calls her, and then realizes that she's trapped. And in this position, in this situation, Henry has two choices. He either lets all these people on this plane die, he either lets the guy that is on that plane helping them out from his position die, gives up his name, gives up the only advantage they have against these terrorists, or he lets the woman he loves more than anything on this planet perish. A woman that understands him, a woman that he understands, that are in the same situation where they can understand where each other are coming from and still find love in between that. He has to choose between people he doesn't know and someone he loves. That wouldn't be an easy thing to choose. Like, you would think, well, there's a ton of people here and this is just one person. But although there is a numbers difference, the relationship is different too. He has no reason to care about any of these random people. No reason whatsoever. But this other person, this one person, is somebody he clicks with, somebody he cares about, somebody he loves, somebody he would do anything in the world for, and this is his chance to prove it. So he gives up Armand, the guy on the plane that was feeding them information and giving them an upper hand. He lets Armand die because he wants to save the woman he loves. But now that that mystery is solved, and now that we know that Henry is the one that was the mole, that was the rat that got all those people killed due to the butterfly effect, a new twist comes in. See, Celia knew that the entire time. She was also setting him up to die. This entire meeting, it seems as if Henry was the one that set up the meetings, that was behind it all. In actuality, Celia was working with feds to get him killed, because they knew that he's the one that did it. She knew because she saw a phone ring years and years and years ago that had that same number on it that was on the call log of where Bill's phone called a suspected terrorist. Now, all that might seem like disjointed thoughts that I'm talking about just for the sake of talking about it, which I mean, they are, but it also leads up to the moment that I wanted to talk about the most. And that moment is when Henry is succumbing to the poison. Because while he is succumbing, he gets a phone call from a hitman that he has had waiting on a yes or no confirmation on whether or not he should kill or spare Celia. And see, I think that's genius because we never figure out if he would have said yes or if he would have said no. All we get are gasps. It is left open-ended. Would he have said yes because he finally understands the betrayal, the hurt, the pain that the main antagonist has felt that has driven the entire narrative of this film? Or would he have said no because the love that has actually driven the entire narrative of this film, in your perspective, is strong enough that he's not going to sacrifice her now, that he still loves her even above himself, even above his own hurt feelings, he still puts her first? See, Henry's character development is based mostly on how you have seen his interactions, his reactions, his conversations, his approaches, his situations throughout the entirety of the film. I think even Henry's betrayal supports that. Like, he could have been doing it in order to protect Celia, as he stated he was, or there could have been something more deep, something more rooted inside of him that made him want to betray the government that ended up betraying him, that caused him to end up betraying somebody else. This could have been some kind of redemption type thing. This was his way of feeling like he is making amends for what happened all those years ago. So leaving whether or not he would have said yes or he would have said no open-ended is perfect for his character. Because whether or not you have seen him as somebody that is doing whatever he can for his government for the majority of the movie, even after they burnt him, whether or not you have seen him as someone who's doing whatever he can for his lover for the majority of the movie, even after he feels burnt by her, even if you see him as someone who is only looking out for himself for the majority of the movie, all of those outlooks, all of those viewpoints, all of that is supported by evidence throughout the film. So whether or not he would have said yes for these reasons or no for these reasons is entirely up to your perception of his character, and that is perfect. But I think that would have been the perfect place to end the movie, but it goes on for a few more minutes. I'm not going to make that mistake. So don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below if you agree, if you disagree, if you have another movie you want me to review, or a movie I've already reviewed that you want a spoiler review of. Let me know. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.